Vikings podcast this 2025 season. I'm Emily Leiker, joined by my Minnesota Star Tribune colleagues Ben Goessling, Andrew Krammer. The Vikings just beat the Texans 20-10 in their preseason opener here at US Bank Stadium. We saw a little bit of JJ McCarthy. We saw a lot of some other guys who we'll talk about later. But Ben, let's start with JJ McCarthy's series. He did one series to open the game. They did not score a touchdown on that series, but they did get into field goal range, put points on the board. What's just kind of your takeaway of how McCarthy looked in his first game action?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it was, I think, what they wanted to see. They didn't have a lot of operational stuff. I mean, he did a good job getting them in and out of the huddle, getting plays in. I mean, there's not going to be a ton of things where they're canning plays and asking him to do all sorts of the things that they'll do in the regular season. But I thought he looked good. It was interesting to see him with a clean pocket a couple of times.
Yes.
He has not had a lot of those in training camp, and the play he makes where he has to step away from a late pressure, pocket was fairly clean on the throw to Jordan Addison, but hits the 18-yarder. He said after the game it's a 25-yard outcut. So to be able to make that throw, that's one of those things that the Vikings have talked about with arm strength and the fact that he made a couple of those plays, as well as making a play, getting a fourth down with his feet. Yeah. I thought a lot of the things he did were pretty good. I mean, there's accuracy things. He was behind Addison on the first one, and then the throw to Lucky Jackson. His explanation on that was pretty interesting, I thought.
Yeah.
That Brian Flores, practicing against that defense as much as he has, kind of sped him up. And he probably could have waited a split second longer and got that throw completed, which probably keeps that drive going. But overall, I think, pretty good start for him in what may be the only preseason action we see, at least as far as a game.
Yeah, it looked pretty good. 12, and maybe ironically, maybe not, the exact same drive length of Sam Darnold a year ago. 12 plays on his only preseason action. So JJ, was it a year to the day or almost a year to the day?
Tomorrow will be a year to the day.
That he suffered the meniscus tear here against the Raiders in last year's preseason opener. Now he comes out, and they put what do you think of the rhyme or reason of why they put all the starters out there that they did with him? Because it was no Jefferson, it was no Darisaw, but those two guys are hurt. The other 9 starters were out there.
Yeah, I think they wanted to get him with the offensive line as best as they could. No Darisaw obviously makes it a different story, but
Aaron Jones too, I suppose.
Yeah, guys that we wouldn't expect them to want to put on the field for injury risk. But I think overall, getting that group together, they haven't had any time together in a game yet, certainly, and haven't had a ton of it in practice with people in and out, Ryan Kelly in and out too. So I think there was a desire to get some of that work in, and certainly a lot more of it this week in those joint practice days.
For what it's worth, I grabbed Donovan Jackson just to hear about his game debut, and he said that all of his veteran peers gave him advice, encouragement post-game, and were like, now you've got the nerves out, rookie. You better be ready to go again next time it comes up. So that was the JJ and the offense series, the first team offenses series. Very quickly after that, transition to Sam Howell. What did we think about Howell? Because obviously he hasn't been the greatest in training camp, which we've talked about, but he comes out of today with 100 passing yards, over 100 passing yards. I don't remember the completion percentage, but
11 of 13.
11 of 13, 105 passing yards, had that touchdown that he carried in. What do we think of him?
Well, I mean, I thought it was interesting. Kevin O'Connell said after the game, he's a guy that he felt like he needed to see in a game, in part because that defense has been as good as it has. The Vikings do a lot of things where the second-team offense practices against the first-team defense and vice versa. So Sam Howell's had a lot of plays where he's having to run for his life, just like J.J. McCarthy has. But it was interesting to hear O'Connell say that because it did kind of lend some credence to the idea that, hey, maybe the practices haven't been that great for him. And that's obviously what we've seen. But when the head coach says it, and he's judging it on different criteria probably than we are, it's worth noting that. So I thought the fact that he said, we needed to see him in games a little bit more. And he did make a couple of nice throws. I thought the deep out that he hit to Jalen Naylor was impressive. He hits Lucky Jackson on kind of a jump ball. But overall, I think he was certainly more efficient than we've seen him. And maybe not a high bar to clear, but they certainly needed to see something from him, as Kevin O'Connell indicated in his post-game press conference.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about how just in practices, the defenses won not just the starters, but the backups against Brett Rypien, against Sam. So it was good to see, if you're the Vikings, that 3 of your 4 quarterbacks look pretty serviceable. Brett Rypien had a tough going before he was pulled for Max Brosmer, but Sam needs more of that, doesn't he? And he probably needs to keep doing that against the Patriots next week.
Yeah, I think it's an important week for him. I don't know that QB2 thing is settled completely yet. I mean, I think they want it to be Sam Howell. I think the fact that they have a guy there that has played the position more so than anybody else on the roster, including J.J. McCarthy, is kind of what they wanted to have in a backup quarterback, but he does need to consistently play well enough to earn that job, or at least keep it in his name.
We're going to loop back around to the other two quarterbacks who we saw in the second half, Rypien and Brosmer, at the end of the podcast. I did want to touch on the fact that we didn't really see any of the defensive starters, or most of them were out for today.
Yeah, right.
What did we think about that tactic and pulling most of those guys, and then what we saw from some of the other guys? Dallas Turner was in there, Ivan Pace was in there, Theo Jackson, but those are all guys that are, minus Ivan, are kind of on that like first string bump between the second string.
Oh, go ahead.
I mean, kind of what we thought, in the sense that you have older guys in that group.
Yeah.
Harrison Smith does not need to be out there. Josh Metellus with the ankle. Yeah, I mean, year 14, I don't know that a preseason series or two is going to make a huge difference for him. So Josh Metellus with the ankle, Jonathan Grenard wasn't going to be a guy that played much because he's too valuable. Jonathan Allen is a guy that you're trying to keep healthy. Javon Hargrave, same thing. O'Connell did say that he expects the joint practices will be bigger days for Javon Hargrave this week if you're worried about or curious about where he's been. So he said normal training camp stuff, didn't offer a ton of specifics about what it was, but I think they've been cautious with him, and those joint practices are going to be key days for him. But they have a lot of older defenders that they're probably not going to put at risk in those games.
Yeah, I think they only started or played three guys you would even consider to be kind of starters. It'd be Ivan Pace, obviously Isaiah Rodgers played 10 snaps, and then maybe Theo Jackson you'd throw in there as your third safety. Dallas Turner also got 9 or 10 snaps in there, but it was all about the backups and all about the depth pieces, because this starting defense, the flip side of McCarthy struggling in practices is that they've been amazing in these practices, so you don't need to see anything from them until week 1. But guys like Gabe Murphy stepped up, Khalif Halassi, these corner turn safety. He said he's been playing not only those two positions, but a dime nickel like slot role as well when they go into those bigger packages. And so in terms of a long shot to make the team, he's a guy that Flores might like because of his versatility.
Yeah, I mean, O'Connell said it after the game that they look for those types of skill sets, that versatility, and we've heard Brian Flores say that a lot. I actually have him. I had him on my 53 because some of the things he's done in camp, and they like those types of guys. I've heard that they are intrigued by him. So, the picks were not in a high degree of difficulty plays. One's an overthrow and one's a batted ball from Tyler Batty, which, there's a good dad joke in there somewhere. The fact that he makes them, though, is, that's what they want, because they have made their living on those things in the past, certainly in the past year. Yeah,
and they've got their top 4 safeties with Harrison, Metellus, Theo, and then Jay Ward, but it was injuries to Metellus and Ward. They put Khalif there, and suddenly he's out here in a preseason game picking off 2 passes. But like you said, it wasn't skill level. It wasn't too tough with Graham Mertz throwing the ball directly to some Vikings throughout this day. But other than that, who else stood out to you on defense? Because I thought when we saw Gabe Murphy get out there, I think O'Connell said he had 5 hits on the quarterback in this game. I also chatted with Gabe after this game, and he mentioned, and I forgot, he missed his entire first training camp with a left leg injury, didn't really get out there until mid-season last year. And he said, now I actually feel confident in what I'm doing, and you're seeing the results out there.
Yeah, he said it started the year on injured reserve, I believe.
That's right,
He didn't come back until mid-November. It was probably by the time you got here that he came back. So.
I think so. I think I remember one of my first weeks, it was like, oh, Gabe Murphy's back. And I was like, sure.
Sure.
Yeah, but I mean, he was awfully impressive today. The 2 sacks, the pressures. I think a guy that they're pretty excited about. It's a tough position to make with all of the depth that they have there, but the fact that they brought him back from injured reserve last year kind of shows you they wanted to keep him around and at least continue to watch him and develop him. I think they see enough potential with him to keep giving him chances, so he may find a way to keep himself around.
Yeah, and those D-line spots are going to be really hard for them to figure out, because I think you had Gabe making it on your 53. I was thinking of putting him off to keep 7 different interior defensive linemen, and then do you keep only 4 edge rushers or 5? This is going to be a really crowded group, because we saw all those guys get out there today, the backups, the reserves who are fighting for jobs, and we saw a lot of guys be impactful as well.
Yeah, we've shouted out most of the guys that I would have on defense, so let's switch to the offensive side and talk about Xavier Scott, who I think was the very early candidate for today for down the depth chart MVP. Like, he just dominated in that third wide receiver spot. Ty Chandler struggled a little bit today, did not always look his greatest, and we know already that there's been some competition, some questions there around him. And so I guess what did each of you think of what Xavier Scott was able to do?
Well, I mean, he was productive. I think the drive they scored, he had the ball, touched the ball on 5 straight plays. There was I think a throw that he had some run after catch on from Sam Howell, and then ran the ball quite a few times in that stretch before Howell finishes the drive with the touchdown. But yeah, he's a guy that has been in the mix, and I mean, you pointed it out during the game that Ty Chandler has not. I think, what did you say, 5 attempts for?
Well, he had 5 attempts
yards?
for 5 yards today.
Yeah.
I think he added a catch and run there a little bit. But if you go back to that San Francisco game that we were talking about for other reasons in week 2 last year, he did really well. It was 10 carries for 82 yards. You're thinking, okay, they got some backup potential for Aaron Jones there. Obviously, it was horrible for him the rest of the season. And if you lump in today's carries, it's been something like 2 yards a carry for him since that week 2 day last year. He needs to have not only a strong camp, which has been up and down for him, but needs to have strong outings out here, because a guy like Xavier Scott is hot on his heels, and he looked great out here.
Yeah, he had a productive day, and I think that is going to continue to be a strong competition. I think the reason we were mentioning the San Francisco game is the last time, now it's August and it's hot outside, but I think it's the last time it's been this hot in here, and that was the home opener last year. That was the game that they very curiously, I remember walking in here that day, it's like, I don't think it's ever been this hot in this building. And I think the working theory was that they didn't put the AC at full blast because Trent Williams was going to be in here, and they knew that if it was hot, Trent Williams might get a little fatigued, and it could work to their advantage. You will not get anybody to admit that on the record, but I've heard enough whispers about that to think that they didn't not mind that.
That was this is more interesting than the preseason game we just watched.
Drafted by Bill Belichick. Let's just say that.
Because this is the same thing that the San Antonio Spurs were allegedly doing to LeBron James in NBA Finals when he famously cramped up. I think it was 2012 or 13. I can't remember. But wow, you're saying that the Vikings are not only fake crowd noise in their past, but they're cranking the heat up.
I mean, it's a weird thing, a weird angle to work in Minnesota, but you know, it's on the humid days you take it when you can get it, I think.
This is my mistake for not pushing us to this sooner and instead letting us get to the silly train first. But we should talk about Rondale Moore's injury.
Gosh,
Goes down, first punt return attempt of the game. We see him pretty much immediately take his helmet off as he's on the sideline. Later, as we watch the replay, we realize he's also grabbing at his left knee. It was his right knee that he's returning from an injury last year that Matt Daniels has said was a dislocated kneecap. Didn't look great for Rondale. I wasn't in there for Kevin O'Connell to hear what he had to say, but certainly him being carted off, them keeping a hand on his leg, and just the reaction that he had, it did not look like it was very good.
No, O'Connell called it a significant knee injury, and significant usually means that it's season ending. I mean, I asked him afterwards, is there concern for his ACL? And he said, we're getting an MRI tomorrow, and we'll figure out what it is then. You're talking season-ending knee injuries. That would be my guess. I don't know that for sure. That's just kind of an educated guess. But significant, whether it's ACL, MCL, anything of that nature where it is season-ending, it's tough for them because the guy had just come back from that, and it had been, I think, something that they felt. I mean, the way you saw guys run over there, a number of players kneeling on the field, including a lot of guys that either weren't playing or had left the game. Jonathan Grenard was over there. J.J. McCarthy, a number of other players are there. And Justin Jefferson, who was on the broadcast in the third quarter, he was mic'd up for the entire third quarter, was late to join the broadcast, as the Vikings said, because he was spending more time in the locker room with Rondale Moore. Yeah. So we don't know what it is yet, but the way people reacted, Kevin O'Connell called it heartbreaking. Yeah. And when a coach uses the word significant about a knee injury, after a game, before the MRI, they are very much concerned from their initial examinations that it's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, I don't recall a single time a coach has ever used that word and they've come back and said, you know what, it wasn't as bad as we thought.
No, I don't either.
It usually is pretty bad, and this one looked bad. Rondale knew it right away. Emily, you wrote about how he just reacted in utter despair and despondent and seemed to know that this was a bad injury. And this is a guy...
his hand on the side of the cars that brought him off, I think, right?
Yeah, and this is a guy who missed all last year with a significant knee injury, and now you're talking about another year for him, and he's 25 years old.
Yeah.
It was a 2021 second-round pick. Gophers fans, not Brosmer. He was in New Hampshire at the time, but Gophers fans know all about Rondale Moore, certainly at Purdue. So it stinks for him. It's a terrible outcome for a guy who had already worked to get back to this point. And then from a football perspective, the Vikings don't have a punt returner.
No, they don't.
Like, do they call up Brandon Powell? Be like, hey, are you still available? Because he is. He's still available.
There are going to have to be some conversations like that, or is there somebody else on the roster that they feel good enough doing that they don't go that way? But whether it's that or wide receiver depth, that is getting to be a bit of a question. Yeah. You have Jordan Addison's suspension in the first 3 weeks of the season. You have Justin Jefferson obviously not practicing at the moment, and nobody's worried about, at least it doesn't seem like anybody's worried about him being ready to go. But I do think depth is becoming a question at that position. And, there's different reasons for it. But, yeah, that is going to be something I think they continue to look at. And
I do recall doing a story in the offseason on Ty Felton. The receivers coach, Keenan McCardell, said about Rondale Moore and Felton that they have a similar stop-start ability, a quickness to their game that we needed to add to this room. We saw a lot of Ty Felton out here today. Not too much on offense, but he was the fourth wide receiver to get in the game.
Great play on a punt as a punt gunner.
Yeah, and then it was returning kickoffs, and then, his best play, as you just mentioned, was forcing that fumble as a punt gunner. So if they can get him going on offense a little bit, that might help negate some of these issues, but we haven't seen him on offense much, certainly not in practices, and then only a little bit today.
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the first names you look at and say, if they're going to fix some of these things internally, he's probably the guy that plays a little bit bigger role than we've seen to this point.
Other injury was to offensive lineman Zeke Carell. He went down late in the game around the start of the fourth quarter. That was his right lower leg, foot, I believe.
Right ankle fracture.
Yeah.
Ankle fracture.
Oh, okay. That's what it came up as. He had to be helped off the field. So that's obviously a bummer as well, especially because we'll talk about this more this week, I think, at some point, because Andrew and you were discussing it post-game a little bit. But the center depth is interesting because Michael Juergens hasn't been the greatest over the past week. There's just been some pre-snap issues, some fumbles, some exchange issues. So, I'm curious where that goes over the next few weeks.
Yeah, and Ben, you've talked about it ad nauseum about how, they've loved this guy. Yes. He was their backup center last year off of no experience at all, just a rookie 7th-round pick behind Bradbury. And he's gotten a lot of work this summer with Ryan Kelly working in and out, getting some rest days, not playing, or playing a little bit here tonight. And we've seen some cadence issues with the new quarterback. We've seen some botched snaps with two different quarterbacks today. I don't know. I feel like they got to see a little bit more out of him.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that's one of those things to watch if we're looking for things to keep track of in the preseason, because you're probably not going to see many, if any, of the starters next Saturday against the Patriots after those joint practices. But that's a guy that I would continue to watch because they like him, and we've said it, but Ryan Kelly, next year, I think they save $11.5 million if they were to release him. Now, we're a long way from that. Obviously, Ryan Kelly's the starting center of this team. But if they need money next year, cap-wise, that is, I think, something they would very much be interested in. And that number can change. There's ways to do it while keeping Ryan Kelly here. But if you have Michael Juergens ready to go, there's a financial benefit to that. And they're certainly going to keep all those things in mind. So I'm sure they would, for a lot of reasons, like to see Michael Juergens be a lot better than he was today.
I promised we'd loop back around to the other two quarterbacks, Brett Rypien and Max Brosmer. This is a little bit of a testy question, get a hot take type question, but based on what we saw today, which was that Brett Rypien was not great, Brosmer did get it score a touchdown. He connected with Miles Price in the back of the end zone. He got them close to the end zone again at the end of the game before kneeling it out. Is there any chance, because it does seem like Brosmer is someone that might get picked up if they were to cut him, send him, and try and sign him on the practice squad, is there any chance they try and sign him and release Brett Rypien?
And then keep 3 on the active roster?
Maybe they trade for a different backup and then keep Brosmer.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think any of this stuff is possible. I mean, we saw it today. I mean, what did you say? Graham Mertz was a 6th-round pick?
Yeah.
So if that doesn't tell you the lack of quality options available to teams at the most important position in sports, I'm not sure what would. So there is always that question of, are you going to be able to get a guy through to the practice squad? I mean, they did have to spend $237,000, I think it was, in guaranteed money to get him here, which means he did have a market. is an undrafted free agent. So are there other teams that would say we want to have a spot for him? And that's always the question of, are you going to bring somebody into your offense that's brand new, that hasn't spent the training camp, preseason time with a new team, and how does that fit in a moment's notice if you bring a guy in? There's always those questions that teams have to ask. But yeah, it is going to be interesting to see how that goes.
I thought it was interesting that they pulled Brett as quickly as they did, and you were tracking this a lot better than I. So Brett just had 2 series, right?
Yeah, I think he was 1 for 4 and had a couple of sacks.
Yeah, and it wasn't good. No. And then all of a sudden, Brosmer's in there to close out a game there, and he ends up getting 3 series, 1 a very quick drive that was a turnover. But I just thought it was interesting that they didn't seem to give Brett much of a leash.
Yeah. I mean, that's not something you see very often in a preseason game. I mean, generally it seems like if they want chances to see guys play, they don't do that, other than coaches with rookie kickers, I suppose. It's a deep cut, but
Vikings fans will know.
Yeah, they'll know. He's gonna miss. I'm gonna let him know. We're gonna go for 2. But yeah, other than that, and the wonders that did for Daniel Carlson's confidence, you don't see that very often in the preseason.
And I will say, I asked Max post-game, I said, did you know that you were going to go in that fourth quarter? Like, was that planned? And he didn't give a super straightforward answer. He kind of said, it depends. There's the give and take of drives, which to me was kind of like we were waiting to see how Brett Rypien was going to do on his drives. But he said he was expecting to play like a little, but I just think it was maybe not as much as he ended up playing.
Yeah. To close the loop on one thing, we should mention that you've probably seen out there that TJ Hawkinson has 3 different injuries, a back, a leg, and a hip. He tells the Minnesota Star Tribune, sponsor of US Bank Stadium and the Minnesota Vikings, that
for strip varsity.
He has a hip flexor injury that he dealt with, but he played today. It was his first ever preseason game for the Vikings. He did it because J.J. McCarthy was playing. He said we wanted to get as many of us out there as possible around J.J., but he says, I'm fine. Obviously going to keep on practicing and playing. It is not 3 different injuries.
No.
It is 1 hip flexor injury. Yep.
Strip Varsity, the only outlet of the Minnesota Star Tribune that has more beat writers than the Vikings beat.
And that takes a lot.
It does take a lot. Nobody else has this many beat writers on the Vikings beat. Strip Varsity, I think, is the only one that has its beat.
Hey,
maybe on any beat in the state.
Subscribe and read all of them.
Yeah,
right. You can read all of our Vikings coverage, all of our high school sports coverage, which now covers the entire state on thestartribune.com. You can follow the Access Vikings podcast on YouTube, and you can see all of our other video content that we're doing, posts, all of that on the Strip Sports Instagram. We will talk to you again sometime this week as the Patriots come to town for joint practices, and then a preseason game next Saturday at noon.